Hello Internet, this is Unarmed Dragon. I'm going to talk a little bit about combat today. I'm going to go over the concepts that are central to combat. We are also going to go over combat styles. We're going to go over combat rounds. We're going to go over combat actions, what you can do during the round. We're going to go over weapon size and reach. We'll cover these in a later video. Engagement, special effects. I think you're going to find combat to be pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff you can do. You can leave out a lot of things, like you can leave out special effects if you want to. You can leave out weapon size and reach if you want to. Although when you add all this stuff together, it actually enhances the flavor of combat, and that's usually what you want to do, is to have combat that's flourishing. It's full of color and vibrant and full of action, of course, since it is combat. So let's take a look at the four central concepts of combat. One is combat can be deadly. This is true. You always want to consider that when you go into combat. If you're not wearing any armor, that can pretty much be the death knell of a high level fighter, no matter what. I mean, because your hit points don't usually go up, so you still have the same hit points normally as what you had from the beginning, which is not a whole lot, and so you can die pretty easy without armor. Or if you have a whole bunch of bad rolls, that can also kill you. Right? So you remember that combat can be deadly. Alright? Combat doesn't need to end in death. You can always run away. Your opponents can run away. You can always have them surrender. Right? These are things that that can happen in combat and need not end in bloodshed or even death. Okay? There's a lot of people that play these games, right? And we're used to, in almost every single game that we play, people die and monsters die. It's usually fight to the death. It's not usually fight to surrender or fight to flee. You think about it, if you encounter a dragon, let's say in the open wilderness, he can fly away if it's taking too much damage, right? Because he's not in his cave or whatever, right? He's just in an environment. He can fly over you, find out what's going on. He can come down and mess with you, and if you prove to be too tough, he can fly away, right? Some people don't do that. Some people would just continue that combat on there until the dragon dies or until the characters die, right? So it doesn't have to be that way. Keep in mind, though, that most Mythras games, when people design them, there's usually some consequence for killing someone. So think about that as well. Combat is both abstract and tactical. All right, that's the third one. Okay, it is abstract, but it's not tactical to the point where it gets ridiculous. Because number one, it's not really designed for tabletop miniatures. However, you can do tabletop miniatures. It doesn't detract from any of that. I mean, it runs pretty smooth with or without miniatures, and a comprehensive range of options exists to take advantage of the situations if one participant gets the upper hand, right? So, what if my, terrorizing warrior Machete, with his Espada de Muerte, right? His death sword, right? Comes in, decides to start hacking on people. Well, there's a lot of ways to take that dude down. I mean, you don't have to just go one straight up man on man with Machete, right? There's different ways to take him out, right? And combat is always exciting because of, the to and fro of, the advantage happening one way or the other. You never know what's going to happen. It's very unpredictable, and yeah, it can be super exciting. And take my word for it, once you get into this game, it will be very, very exciting. However, you will have a little bit of trepidation going into combat, as you should. All right, so the components are combat. Right, we have combat styles. You have combat rounds. We have combat actions. We have weapon size and reach. Remember that reach is optional, by the way. Reach is always optional. You don't have to include it. Okay? There's a whole mess of rules there for reach. So if you want to avoid reach, you can just chunk it. Okay? You're not going to break the game. All right? There's engagement. Right? Combatants can be hit or be hit by a direct opponent, depending on the circumstances. Right? Then there's all the special effects, which is kind of the linchpin, basically, that kind of brings this whole thing together, right? It holds the wind in the sails, basically, when it comes to combat, and adds so much flavor to have these special effects. I even have combat cards that are actually these special effects, right? They're beautifully illustrated, combat cards that have all the special effects on them. They have certain symbols at the bottom, like this is for unarmed combat, this is for ranged, right? There's a whole bunch of beautiful illustrations here, one for each one, right? These are awesome. I really love these cards. They make combat go so quickly, but these are the special effects, right? They have the text on the other side, right? You can see. Right, and green and red means that they're both defensive and offensive, right? Green is totally defensive, and red is offensive, right? These are pin weapons, grip, impale, kill silently, right? There you go. All right, so consider getting these, right? Not trying to sell anything. I'm just saying they're good. They're good to use. I've used them plenty of times, right? I haven't even shown you all of them, so there's some other stuff there. Okay, so let's talk about combat styles. That's the first thing on the list is combat styles, right? Combat styles. All right, combat style is basically a group of weapons, a package of weapons. Okay, related by career, culture, ideologies, environments, schools of combat. Okay, not difficult. Some people find it difficult to put combat styles together, but it's just a package of weapons. Think about it, right? There's a whole bunch of samples up here, right? Centaur warrior. He has a spear. He has a shield. He has a short bow. Right? Those are the things that he is capable of using, right, with his combat style. That makes sense, right? Because that's how we see centaurs. We mostly see them with spears and shields and bows. Okay? That means that the character has learned how to use all these weapons that are in the style, right? Both singly and in combinations, right? Different combinations. So, I mean, it just means that they can use those weapons in all the ways that they can be used. They've been trained specifically to use those weapons, all right? Ultimately, it's up to the GM, right? What you get. But if you have multiple combat styles, one suggestion is to avoid duplication. Okay, try to avoid duplication. Right, longsword in every single combat style is probably not going to be good, or even give you an advantage. Because it doesn't make any sense that you would fight with a longsword any whit less than a different style that may have a higher skill level, right? It doesn't make any sense. So it kind of has to go with the logic of what you're doing, right? The logic of your setting and how you see these combat styles. All right, so how do you create a combat style? Well, what is the importance of combat in your setting, right? Are you doing gladiators, right? That's one way to do it, right? What about the Murmillo, right? What about the guy with the cestus, right? And cestus and shield, right? Or what about the guy with the net and the trident? Okay, usually like two weapons in a combat style for gladiators, right? So think about, right, that's one way where the styles are actually very exclusive, right, to the type of fighting that character is going to be doing. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that the characters are taught by a cult or they're school specific, like assassins, right? The assassin may show you assassin's cult or assassin's school or guild may show the character the proper use of the garrote, perhaps adding to that a dagger, or perhaps adding to that a blowgun, or perhaps adding to that darts, or perhaps a dagger, or maybe a mix of all those, right? So maybe you got the garrote, the dagger, and darts, okay? And then maybe the use of poisons that goes with that, all right? So then that's another skill you got to have to add to your combat skills, right? It starts to add more texture to your character, okay? What about career specific, right? Are they legionnaires, right? Legionary soldiers should demonstrate competence, right, in the use of like maybe a spear and a shield and a short sword, right? Here it says short sword, dagger, scutum, javelin. Number and type of weapons should be roughly match those of similar historical context, right? Between 3 or 4 weapons per style, right? Historical build, right? Combat style. That makes sense too. What about a weapon class based style, right? Each style incorporates every weapon of a particular design or damage type, right? An example may be all swords, incorporating everything from short swords to great swords or bludgeoning weapons, covering clubs, hammers, maces, and everything else which relies on bashing to inflict damage. As can be surmised, these categories can potentially include dozens of weapons, or perhaps only a few weapons are available, right? Perhaps you're on a desert type planet and maybe all the weapons are made of bone, stone, and every once in a while obsidian. Hint, hint. Some of you guys may recognize some of those clues there. Anyway, so combat styles can also be all-encompassing. These styles are inclusive of any and all melee weapons, ranged weapons, or both. This option is only recommended, though, that particular one, right, all-encompassing, only recommended for campaigns where combat is infrequent and secondary to other forms of interaction, right? Should be obvious that not all combat styles are going to be equal or necessarily need to balance with one another. Such considerations are intended to be based on culture, social class, career, things like that, and not be limited by game mechanics, right? We want the game mechanics to get out the way of the story, right? So even the choice of weapons can be part of the story, okay? Yeah. I mean, mostly, you know, you can create your own character with an eye for weapons, right? Especially fighters, warriors, right? They love weapons, and they love to use weapons that are vicious or very specific type of weapons, right? Kind of gives them their signature, right? Sort of a signature weapon, okay? Not everybody wants to use swords. I am particularly fond of using elves with 2 weapons, usually hatchets. And some people go, hatchets? What's the deal with that? You got an elf with hatchets? Where does that come from? And I said, well, I have a few specific ideas, but we'll not discuss that until you start to get to know my character, and then maybe he'll start to tell you a little bit more of his background and his history and why he uses 2 hatchets, right? And keeps them razor sharp, right? So that's, you know, something to think about, right? Weapon choices, right? Brings us to weapon choices when you create your combat style, right? What about 2-handed weapons? When you select 2-handed weapons, you got to consider that they have an advantage in terms of weapon reach and how much damage they do, but they also leave your character vulnerable if you end up losing that weapon, because you usually don't have anything except for maybe a small backup weapon like a dagger. Okay, if that. A lot of characters don't even carry backup weapons, right? Shields, right? They're good defense, but they're also weapons, right? You can shield bash somebody with one, right? They also cover lots of different weapons. They can also parry ranged weapons. They're the only thing that can parry ranged weapons. Okay. And then we have two weapon style, right? Or two offensive weapons simultaneously. And just like every other game I've ever played, right? The secondary offhand weapon must be at least one size category smaller than the main weapon, unless both are small. Does that make sense? Of course it makes sense. So it's used in almost every single game, right? So that makes sense. That's fine. What about ranged weapons, right? They grant the ability to strike from beyond the immediate reach of an enemy, right? Typically at the cost of a lower rate of attack. Unless you're using anachronistic firearms or sorcerous devices, right, which can shoot multiple times, like machine guns, right, machine pistols, okay, things like that. Combat style could potentially include unusual weapons such as siege engines, or maybe things of a weirder nature. You know, maybe you got blasters, okay. Maybe you got steampunk weapons. All right, consider those to be part of a combat style as well. Then there's unarmed combat styles. Man, you can totally get into that. How many unarmed combat styles could you make? Man, probably hundreds, right? You start thinking about kung fu, theater, right, and guys going after each other, samurai, ninja, you know. Crane Master, Tiger Master, Dragon Master, right? These guys all doing unarmed combat after each other. Some of them might even use mysticism. Ooh, now that's an idea, isn't it? You combine unarmed combat with mysticism, man, you can take on those dudes with the two-handed swords and the pole arms and the everything. You can take them down, right? With unarmed combat styles. Right, it starts to get exciting just thinking about what you can do. There's potential there, right? Lots of potential. Right. What are the benefits of the combat style? Well, there's combat style traits, right? Here's a huge list. You can make up your own. Generally, it's usually a shift of one difficulty, right? Or it negates one type of combat action. Right, so you keep that in mind, right, if you want to make some up, right? So let's read a couple of these, and we're not going to read all of them, but we'll read a couple of these here. What about skirmishing? This style permits launching ranged attacks whilst at a run. You usually can't do that, right? So you got skirmishing, that gives you an advantage, right? What about throw weapons? Any nominal melee weapon in the style can be thrown at no penalty to skill. When used in this way, weapons damage roll is halved. Hey, that's pretty cool. What about, let's see, intimidating scream? Oof. Barbarians. Their barbaric yop, right? Style encourages frequent yells and bellows in combat to intimidate foes, making any psychological resistance roll inflicted on an opponent one grade harder. Ooh, instills terror into his enemies. Man, that's cool. Oh yeah, I could see that. Intimidating scream. I like that. For this formation fighting there, do or die, defensive minded. There's a whole bunch there, right? You can make up your own. Don't be afraid to make your own. You're not going to break this. You're not going to break the system. As long as you stay within those guidelines that I was telling you, like maybe you can counter an action, a combat action, right? Or you shift by one difficulty, then you're doing good. You're not going to hurt it, right? The reason you do those style traits is not so that way you get a technical advantage, right? That's not really what it's for. It's usually used to add flavor, okay? It's usually used to add flavor. That's what we use them for. And remember, right, the four central concepts of combat are that combat can be deadly, right? It need not end in death. It's both abstract and tactical, right? There's some of the abstract thinking that's going on here, right, as well as tactical. And combat is exciting, right? It's making combat exciting, you know? That's what that's for. Use of weapons not covered by a combat style, okay? In a nutshell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different situations, okay? One is that you got a substantially different weapon. Well, your default is strength plus dexterity. That's what you end up with. You end up with a default, okay? If it's substantially different, you end up with a default. If it's reasonably different, then you get 2 grades of difficulty added to your combat skill. If it's broadly similar, you get 1 grade of difficulty. If you have a similar weapon, you don't take any penalties at all. You use a standard difficulty, right? If you have one unfamiliar weapon paired with a trained weapon, you only get 1 grade of difficulty as a penalty, okay? Any of these penalties that are imposed upon you or onto a character cannot be reduced below your strength and dex, right? They cannot be reduced below the default, all right? Keep that in mind. You cannot be reduced below the default, okay? So that's that in a nutshell, okay? That was not hard. Pretty simple, all right? You can make these cards yourself. I mean, you know, there's this one. This one's kind of probably useful, right? This you can actually use in combat. Like this guy picks up a chair. All right, it's substantially different. Well, he uses strength and dex. There you go. Right. Okay. What about combat rounds? Combat rounds. All right, they're 5 seconds long. Not that long, but a whole crap of stuff can happen in 5 seconds. All right. So we start with initiative. Everybody rolls a 1d10 for initiative. Okay? D10, initiative, D10. Okay, then we have cycles and turns, right? Is it your turn during this cycle? Is it his turn during this cycle? Right? So the cycle goes down by the numbers, right? Going from highest to lowest, all right? And then each action is made up of, you know, a declaration, some dice rolls, maybe some reactions on the part of the opponents, you know, or maybe you're the opponent at that time, you know, you're going to react to maybe an attack against you, and then the resolution of what happens there, okay? So that's pretty simple. That's it in a nutshell. Done. All right, so combat initiative. All right. So combat initiative basically determines the combat order, right? And it's fixed. Okay? It's fixed. One more time. It is fixed. Once you set the combat order, right? Once you determine the initiative order, it's fixed, right? Unless something happens, right, where you got to roll initiative again, right? Like change range, you disengage from somebody. That you can spend an action point to reroll your initiative. Yep, that'll change the initiative order. But other than things like that, it is fixed. It's done. Once you roll initiative, we're not changing again. We're not rolling again. That's it. Roll once. It's over. We're gonna write it all down and in order, and that's how it's gonna go. Okay, so we have an initiative bonus, and we also have a armor penalty, right? So when you're wearing armor, you end up with armor penalty. Okay, you can look at the equipment list, and you can see that there's armor penalties for the type of equipment that you're wearing. Okay. Okay, so if we are wearing laminated line of thorax or basanted armor, which gives us an AP of 3, right? And armor points, right? Of 3. A full set will give us a penalty of 3. Okay, so if we're wearing half plate, it gives us a penalty of 6. If we're wearing mail, it gives us a penalty of 7, right? That's for a full set. Okay, so if we're wearing our scale mail, right, brigandine, we have an armor penalty of 5. Okay, so my initiative bonus right? We saw that in the beginning, character creation, that we can end up with an initiative bonus, right? And that initiative bonus is based off of, what is initiative bonus based off of? And it says right here, the average of intelligence and dexterity. So if I have a 12 and a 14, that's 26. My initiative bonus is 13. My penalty for wearing Byzantium mail, right, was going to be, for wearing brigandine was going to be 5, right? So 13 minus 5 is what? 8. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and calculate that out first and just go ahead and write it down, right? So take my pencil on my character sheet, and once I have this all together, then it's going to be 1d10 plus 8. Because I already know that my initiative bonus was 13, right? And my armor penalty was 5. Alright, so now I end up with an 8, right? I'll just leave it at that and not worry about it so much. Right, so now I got a plus 8. So every time we roll for initiative, I roll 1d10 plus 8. Right, my highest can be an 18. Okay, so then we want to fill out or create an initiative roster or cycle of turns. Okay, that's what I suggest. This may or may not work for you. Okay, it works for me. Now, it may not work for you, but you may start out this way, so you have something to go by. And for those of you who have not done this before, and you'll come up with your own style, your own system later, right? But once you figure out what it is that's important to you to keep track of, right? Because some people keep track of all kinds of stuff in their head, and some people want everything. Okay, they want actual sheets, right? And they put their sheets in order. Okay, and I'm like, I don't need all that just to have initiative, right? So I put it on a index card, right? So the very minimum, we want to know that if Anathame has a 22, she's at the top. Zamothus has an 18, he's next. The bandits rolled a 15, they're next, and Mew rolled a 12. He ends up being 4th, right? So we go from top to bottom. We're going to have at minimum their numbers and their names, so we know when in the cycle Anathame gets her turn. When in the cycle Zamothus gets his turn. When in the cycle the bandits get their turn, right? We want to have at least that going, right? So here's one that's taken from the game, from an actual game, right when we first started. Okay, so we rolled initiative. Jabu rolled a 23, Dolo rolled a 22, Kroll rolled a 18, and the Cultist rolled a 16. I also include Jabu's action points, and you can see Jabu has 3, Dolor has 3, Kroll has 3, the Cultists have 2. Because these are player characters, they also have luck points I want to keep track of. So sometimes that will go down, right, in a round as it goes. So I'm going to keep track of their luck points. Jabu has 2, Dolor has 3, Kroll has 2, and of course the Cultists have none. Okay? And they can only use one proactive action per cycle. Okay, we may have multiple cycles in a round because they have they have 3 action points, right? They may do all 3 actions in one round, right? So that means we're going to go through this cycle in multiple turns, right? It's not just going to happen all at once, and the round is not just one action and one action, right? It has to be, it's going to end up being multiple actions all at once. Right, if they don't choose to do anything during their turn, right, dither is the default action. That means they sat there playing crossword puzzles with themselves, okay, while action was happening. So dither is the default when they do nothing. All right, so, and you also get 1 reaction per threat. That's per threat. You have to spend an action point for that, okay? So if you got 2 action points left, you can do up to 2 reactions in a turn. Okay, in a cycle, right? Because reactions are out of turn, right? They're not, they can be performed at any time, right? So this is what an actual one looks like, right, from an actual game, right? So we have that we were doing. So this is what this one was. All right. Okay. Now that we know we got 5 seconds, we know we got the initiative done, we know what cycles and turns are. Okay, we're going to go to combat actions. All right, combat actions. Okay, getting through this. I'm liking that. All right, so combat actions. Right here. Okay. Combat actions, you're limited by the number of action points that you have. The action points reset the next round. Okay. Any combat action, except for free actions, costs 1 action point. There are 13 proactive actions that you can choose from. You get 1 per cycle. Right? And there are 4 reactive actions you can use. There's 1 per threat. And there are 6 free actions that you can do. You can do as many of those as you want to. Keep in mind, game masters, that you go ahead and take logic into account. It's only 5 seconds, okay? There's no villain monologues or hero monologues that are gonna go on and on and on for more than 5 seconds that are gonna be free actions, okay? Not gonna happen. Even though as nice as they are, okay, that just means they're going to last longer than a round, okay? So it's not a free action if they do that. So let's go and check this out. Okay, proactive actions. Proactive actions are activities a character can attempt on his turn by spending an action point. Some may take several turns to complete, each turn costing its own action point, all right? There's attack. You can do that. Roll to attack. Roll your combat style. Did you get less in your combat style? You hit. Awesome. The other guy gets a chance to parry. He gets a reaction, right? Brace. Character braces himself by taking a firm stance, leaning into the direction of the forthcoming attack. For purposes of resisting knockback or leaping attacks, the character's size is treated as 50% bigger. Against the bat special effect, size is doubled. Benefits of bracing are lost once the character moves away from the place they planted themselves. Cast magic. Okay? What does that mean? It means you cast your spell. Alright? It may take several turns to cast your spell, but you're casting your spell. Okay. Change range. We'll talk about that later, but this is that option of reach in play. Okay? So that has to be there if you're going to be using reach. Okay. Delay. Very different from dither. Delay. This allows you to conserve your action. Right? You conserve your action. So you can instead perform a reactive action at a later time, such as interrupt or parry. Okay. The action point cost of delaying is covered by whatever act is finally performed. Alright. If the delayed action is not taken, you lose your point. Okay. And you're considered to have dithered. Okay, dithered. I'm playing tic-tac-toe, guys. What are you gonna do this turn? I'm gonna file my nails. Okay, so dithered. The character can decide to simply waste his turn doing nothing useful. Right, dither. That's a default action. If you don't choose anything, you're said to have dithered. Okay? Hold magic. Alright, so hold magic is like, okay, I have a fireball already, but I'm going to hold this until those guys turn the corner. I'm going to smack them with it. Right, so hold magic. You can do that. Right, you don't have to delay action. You can hold your magic. Once casting is complete, the character may hold a spell, miracle of spirit, and temporary check, awaiting the best moment to release it. The magic may be held back for as long as the character continues to take this action on his subsequent turn, but allows free use of the counterspell reaction if pertinent to this spell. Okay? mount, get on top, and get off of a riding beast, right? I want to get on my Crodlu, and I'm gonna charge. My war lizard is ready to go. He's chomping at the bit. I'm gonna mount him and ride into combat, right? So just mount. You can mount or dismount for an action point. Outmaneuver. Oh, move. We're at move. Move is something you can do. You don't have to do it like it does. You don't have to do it every single time, right? The one does not need to spend an action point on move to engage an opponent. All right. So let's just take a look at this little summary here. It says moving up towards a combat. Okay. So let's say these guys, you know, here you have Zamoltis kicking some ass, right? He gets the centaurs, and you know, she gets this little wizard guy. She's gonna smash him, right? But she's got no, look, he's got no armor, no nothing. Whatever he's doing here, looks like he's about to do some kind of magic. And if she beats him initiative wise, he's gonna get his ass handed to him. So this guy right here, right? So let's say Zamoltis, he's a few steps away from this guy. You know, you don't have to use a move action to go and attack this, to do an attack, right? That's what that means, right? You're already in the area, okay? Unless you're choosing a different person, you know, we know you're going into combat, right? So you don't have to use movement to engage somebody, but you can move towards combat with movement, or you can perform a dramatic action within combat, like swing from a rope, you know, across the mainsail, right? Avoid that spar that's there, come back over to the other side, right? To the starboard bow, right? You can do that. That's a move action, okay? I highly recommend it. Swashbuckling is highly encouraged in Mythras, okay? So that's something you can do as a move, right? But you do not have to use a move to engage in a combat. All right? So far, so good. Outmaneuver. Okay? Outmaneuver is meant for multiple opponents, right? When you're trying to evade or disengage from multiple opponents, you can use outmaneuver, right? Those that fail to beat the opposed evade roll, okay, right, cannot attack that combat round, all right? So, ready weapon. So this is not something to argue over because it costs you an action point. The character may draw a sheath, withdraw, or reload a weapon. It's right there, black and white. Costs you a point. If your weapon's not ready, you hear something on the other side of the door, you're camping out in the dungeon, you wake up your friends and tell them to be quiet, right? You ready your weapons before something bashes that door down, so you don't have to waste an action point readying your weapon, okay? So it costs an action point to ready a weapon. Regain footing. If unengaged with an opponent, the character can regain his footing from being tripped or knocked down. If engaged, the character must win an opposed test of brawn or athletics with the opponent before being able to stand, okay? Struggle. If the character is the victim of a certain type of attack or special effect, he may attempt to extract himself or herself from the situation. For example, breaking free from a grapple or a pin weapon. Okay? That's struggle. So we covered all the proactive actions. Okay? There's a whole bunch of them. If you can't find something in here that applies to what you want to do, I think you just need to explain to the Game Master what it is you want. Normally, most of that stuff is going to be found right here. It's going to be usually a proactive action. And usually not too hard to figure out. Okay, you just have to read the description, and that'll tell you exactly, what you need to do. And these are usually worded really well. Okay, so we're still going down, right, this list of actions that you can do. So the next set are called reactive actions. All right, there's only 4 of them, right? One of them is a counter spell. Character can attempt to dismiss or counter an incoming spell, miracle, or spirit. This assumes that countering magic has a casting time of 1 turn. Otherwise, it must be prepared in advance and temporarily withheld using the hold magic action. Okay? Successfully intercepting magic in this manner is assumed to negate the entire spell and miracle, even those with multiple targets or areas of effect. Right? Very specific wording there. Okay? Just like I said, all you gotta do is read it. It's usually very specific enough to cover almost every single situation out there. Okay? You're not gonna cover every situation. There's no system that covers every situation. Right? Players are gonna get into a mess. Right? And when they do, they're going to come up with stuff you never heard of or stuff that you never seen sooner or later. And not going to be found in here. You're just going to have to make a ruling based on what you already know, based on what the rules say. Within those guidelines, it should be pretty set, Okay, so evade. The character can attempt to dive or roll clear of threats such as incoming missiles or a charging attack. Using evade. Now listen carefully. There's no dodge in Mythras. Okay? Only evade. Using evade leaves the character prone unless mitigated by some special consequence. Thus, the character's next turn is usually spent taking the regained footing action to stand again. See evading on page 103. Okay, so evading. Alright. Interrupt. Delaying characters only. Remember we said that about that delay? Delay is not dither. Delay is delay. It's very different, right? Dither is, I'm knitting, right? And I have no time for combat. I'm knitting. Okay, so interrupt. Delaying characters only. Halts an opponent's turn after his declaration. Remember what I told you? Declaration, dice rolls, reaction, resolution. Alright? After his declaration. In order to take your own delayed turn. Assuming no change in the tactical situation, the opponent continues his turn after yours is completed. If unable to still achieve his original declaration, the opponent's action point is wasted. An interrupt can also be used against anyone passing close by the delaying character within weapon reach. Within weapon reach. Okay? So that's what interrupt does. Okay? It's talking about delay and interrupt right here. Alright? Delay is intended, now listen, okay, because this is about flavor of the rules, the flavor of the rules, right? Delay is intended to be a way of allowing a character to conserve all their action points in a round for reactive actions, for example, parrying. Interrupt, on the other hand, is intended to permit preemptive actions which could but do not necessarily involve combat, such as slamming a door shut, knocking a siege ending off target, waiting for the clear shot, and so on. It is also worded to allow characters to intercept those that try to dodge or pass close by them. Neither delay nor interrupt are intended to be used as a way of gaining an action point advantage over a closing opponent. It is not in the spirit of the rules to permit the withholding of actions until engagement has been initiated. You know what that means. I don't think I have to explain it to you, okay? So there will be some people who try to take advantage of the rules as they are, and you shouldn't let them, okay? So parry. parry. The character can attempt to defend against an incoming attack using a combination of parrying, blocking, leaning, ducking, or sidestepping footwork to minimize the blow. Okay? Alright. We'll talk about this parrying thing and weapon size and reach. That all has to come together right there. Alright. So, the reactive actions are counterspell, evade, or interrupt, or parry. Okay, those all cost an action point. Alright, so how far are we? We are down to free actions. And how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 of them, okay? They can be performed at any time during the combat round and cause no action points. Assess the situation. If unengaged, the character can make a perception roll and no action point costs. Success in the roll alerts them to any relevant changes in the tactical situation. Drop weapon. What else is there to say? You dropped your weapon. Signal. If unengaged, gesturing or signal to one or more participants, as long as they can perceive the sign, is a free action. You have to be unengaged, okay? Unengaged. Assess situation. Unengaged. Perception roll. Signal. Unengaged. Okay? Speak. Character can speak at any time during combat, but what is said should be limited to short phrases. Phrases which can be uttered in 5 seconds or less. For example, time to die. Look out behind you. Or damn you to hell. Okay, so we got all these crazy things you can yell that are free actions. Whenever I play, I usually use this speak free action for my character. He's very vocal, or she is very vocal, depending on what kind of character I'm playing. Use a luck point. Using a luck point to reroll a particular result, for example, is a free action. Free action. What about this one? This one you want to pay attention to, okay? Ward location. It is a free action. Free action can be performed at any time during the combat round and cost no action points. The character guards a particular hit location from being hit by dedicating one of his weapons to statically cover the area. Any blow which lands on that location has its damage automatically downgraded as per normal for a parrying weapon of its size. The ward continues until the dedicated weapon is used to attack or actively parry. Establishing a ward or changing the hit location covered must be performed prior to an opponent rolling to attack. The character, right, has to declare this, right, prior to the roll. Due to their design, shields can cover multiple areas. For further explanation, see passive blocking on page 105. Well, page 105 seems to have a lot of answers to a lot of things, but here we go. Okay, all the free actions: assess situation, drop weapon, signal, speak, use luck point, ward location. All right, which brings us to our last part of this discussion for today, and that's weapon reach and size. Okay, so there's a little thing on size categories. Like, this is like for if you're gonna make your own weapons. All right, or if you got monsters you're making, this kind of helps give you an idea. That's what this is for. Okay, it's not trying to tell you you have this weapon, it's this big. No, you don't need that. You got the equipment table over here to tell you, right? The equipment table has everything on there. It tells you how big something is, how small something is, whether it's two-handed or not, right? How much it weighs, what its armor is, right? Right, you got your damage size, your reach, your combat effects that it can be used for, its encumbrance, its own armor points and hit points, its own traits, what type of milieu it can be found in, and how much it normally costs. Okay, all that stuff is in there. You don't need this to do that. Now, if you make a new weapon, or you're trying to make a monster that has attacks that are similar to certain weapons, this is a good guide to show you size categories and reach categories that you can do, okay? Keeping track of attack rolls, yeah. We'll talk about that later, but basically you need to leave your dice exactly where they're at and don't touch them. Because sometimes we need to go back and look at that number, right? So don't mess with that. That's one important rule too. I wouldn't take that rule lightly. Leave those dice alone as soon as you're done with rolling them. Okay. All right. So weapon size. Weapon size has to do with parrying and damage reduction. Okay. So the way you do this weapon size thing is you use your attacking weapon. Okay. So if you want to go to the combat weapons page, right, one-handed weapons are going to be on page 63, and we'll take a look at some in just a minute. Okay. Weapon size is about parrying, and it's the weapon's ability to impose and parry damage. All right. So we also have reach. Reach is optional. Okay. And reach has a whole bunch of rules. We'll go over that in a minute. Whether an opponent lies within range or of being struck. Okay. Lies within range of being struck. Okay. So we're going to go with weapon sizes. That's the easiest thing to cover. Okay. There's size categories. You can see them right here. Small, medium, large, huge, and enormous, ginormous, right? This is the damage reduction table, and it's on page 95, right? So I'm going to look up right now. I'm going to look up a short sword, right? On page 63, and I see that a short sword has a size of medium, does 1d6 damage. All right, let's say I roll a d6, and I get a 4. Okay, so that's 4 points of damage. Alright, so the short sword is a medium, so I look it up here, and then I look up the hatchet, okay, because that's the thing that guy's parrying with, right? He successfully parries with a hatchet, which is a size small weapon, alright? So the hatchet is a size small weapon against a medium weapon, means he can only block half the damage. So I was going, man, he parried my attack. But actually, 2 points of damage got through. Alright, so 2 points of damage is what he has to deal with. And if he has no armor, then it goes straight to hit points. Okay? So that's how that works, right? So a short sword versus a hatchet can only parry half damage. Right? You can see that just by looking at the damage reduction table. You probably want to have this handy somewhere. Alright. I have the Dungeon Master screen or the Game Master screen, referee screen, whatever you want to call it, for Mythras, with the sheets that are landscaped to get tucked in there. Alright. It has this on there. And I use it a lot, so you either might want to copy that onto a piece of paper by hand or photocopy, or perhaps get the Game Master screen so you can have it all the time. It looks nice, professional, makes you look like a pro when you set that thing up on your gaming table. Okay, so yeah, man, you set that up with the gaming table along with your combat cards. Woof! You know you're a serious Mythras player. Okay. Reach categories. Okay, so when we have the reach categories, we have touch, short, medium, long, and very long. Okay, this assumes if you're going to use this optional system, this assumes a reach difference of 2 or more. Okay, so let's go over to a couple pages over here. Weapon reach. Okay. So weapon reach, closing, and opening range is found on page 106. Okay. Its associated mechanics for closing and opening range are optional rules for those desiring more realistic combat. In general terms, when two combatants face one another armed with weapons of greatly disproportionate reach, the wielder of the longer weapon can keep his opponent at bay, preventing him from attacking. If, however, the wielder of the shorter weapon can step inside the effective reach of the longer weapon, then the tables turn, and the combatant with the longer weapon will find himself unable to parry with that weapon. The following rules assume a reach difference of 2 or more steps between the longer and the shorter weapon. Thus, a dagger, short, against a falchion, medium, would suffer no penalties in combat, whereas the same dagger against a great axe, which is long, would. Okay, so you will either be finding yourself, when this happens, fighting at the longer reach or fighting at the shorter reach. And you can read this in here. This is all in here. These notes are taken right from the book. Okay, so we're on page 106. That's where I got this from. All right. So fighting at the longer reach, right? Fighting at the longer reach. All right. Here's your options. You can either attack the weapon, right? When you do that, you have to use a damaged weapon special effect, which is on page 97. All right. You can close the range by using change range, which is a combat action, or close range, which is a special effect and it's automatic. Or you can hope to win an appropriate special effect. Okay, those are your options. Right, so if you're going to change range using a combat action, right, that one's on page 91. Right, change range. Character can attempt to close on or retreat from an opponent, changing the range in which he is fighting to take best advantage of his weapon's reach, or disengage from engagement entirely. See weapon reach, closing, and opening range on page 106. Okay, so it's actually right here on page 107. All right, you have two options. Okay, the opponent has two options. If you decide that you're going to change range, your opponent has two options. One is he can maintain the range. Two is he can attack you. All right, you got one or two of those that he can do. All right, so in both cases, if the opponent has no action points left or chooses not to spend an action point, then the attempt to close is automatically successful. Okay? In order to maintain the range, your opponent has to win an opposed evade roll against you. Alright? So, he has to use his combat style. Alright? And then you have to use evade. Alright? That's the way to do it. Oh no, it's not. It's both. It says the combatants match evade skills in an opposed test. Okay, so it's both of they both have to use evade. All right. So evade. They both have to use evade in an opposed roll, and I'm glad I got that straight. They both use evade skills in an opposed roll. If your opponent wins, he maintains the distance. If you win, then you close the distance. Okay? Or, let's say your opponent wants to attack. The character will bridge the distance no matter what. Alright? So, I'm gonna attack. Right? I'm also going to leave my dice there because now the character has to make an opposed roll. We're using his evade skill, right? It says, however, if the opponent decides to attack the closing character instead, he must make an opposed roll of his combat skill versus the closing character's evade skill. See, that's where I got combat skill again. See, I probably just thought they were both used for the same thing. So combat skill versus the closing character's evade skill. The character's evade skill, all right? against the combat skill of the attacker. If the opponent wins, right, he strikes the character and any special effects apply. All right. Whether or not the opponent hits you or not, the closing character bridges the distance and gains the advantage of having the shorter weapon. Okay. Done. We've changed range. Alright, now we're into fighting at the shorter reach. Okay, that's where we're at here, right? This is something really simple, right? There's 4 things that happen here at the shorter reach. The longer weapon cannot parry. He can only use the haft or the hilt to hit you with, and the size of his weapon is reduced by the difference in the reach categories. Okay, so like we were talking about up here, a long versus a short, right? So the size of the weapon goes down by 2 categories, right? So a great axe, what is the size category of a great axe? Let's take a look, see if we can find it real quick. If not, I won't waste your time. Let's see. Okay, 2-handed weapons, great axe, great sword, halberd, poleaxe. Here you go. The size of a great axe is huge. Okay, so he's going to go down by 2 size categories. He goes from huge down to large down to medium. Okay, so now it's a medium versus a small, and as we saw earlier, he can deflect half the damage, and the size is reduced by the difference in reach categories. So, right, we saw how that works, and it only does 1d3 plus 1 damage. In this case, he would be able to parry half of that damage. So the max he can get out of here is 4. Half of that is 2. So he can only do a maximum 1 or 2 points of damage, right? Striking with the haft against his opponent with the dagger, if the range is changed to fighting at the shorter reach. Okay? At this point, here's your options if you're fighting at the shorter reach. You can either reopen the range between you, right? You can draw a shorter backup weapon, like a dagger. You know, it takes an action point to draw a weapon, right? You can defend with unarmed skill, or you can win a useful special effect by chance, or your last option, evade. Remember, evade, you end up on the ground, right? So if you choose to withdraw, this effectively disengages the character from that opponent. You will be far enough away so that way your opponent cannot attack you. Otherwise, there's no point in doing this, right? So effectively disengages the character from that opponent. If you use the withdraw special effect, it's automatic. If you're going to do change range, right, you go to page 107, you do the change closing range thing right here, right? If you want to do outmaneuver, which is on page 104, where you have multiple opponents, right? There's outmaneuvering right there. You can use that, right? Once you're disengaged, or you are no longer engaged in combat with that opponent. So you may use another AP on your turn to reroll initiative to put you in a different number in the cycle. You can flee the battle, you can seek out a new opponent, or you can perform some other act. Okay. So that's the first couple of things in a nutshell, right? We got all the way up to, right, we did this, right? Combat styles, combat rounds, combat actions, weapon size, and reach. All right, so then we're gonna go into engagement. We're gonna talk about special effects. We're gonna talk about how combat works, right? Attacks and parries, damage reduction, parrying a missed attack, right? Unable or unwilling to parry, failed rolls and fumbles, special effects. All right, the head again. All right. Impale, special effects summary, right? Try to get into situational modifiers, talk about what engagement means, right? Some of the close combat mechanics that are not covered in the everyday situations, like charging, cover, flying combat, knockback, pulled blows, sweep attacks, right? And if we can, we'll fit in ranged combat, because there's a few different things going on there. And we'll talk about hit location, wound levels, okay, and heroic last stands. Maybe we'll talk about the whole other section next time. It's a lot to cover, right? We covered basically 86 to 94. And this would be 94 to 111. That's a big difference. So, I might cover a little bit less than that. I might just leave ranged for later. And do ranged along with hit locations, hit points, wounds. Maybe some options for hit points and hit locations. Definitely cover these optional rules of rabble and underlings, which I think are so important to understand and to be able to incorporate into your game. So, that being said, that's where we're at. And you guys enjoy your gaming, and I will talk to you later.